Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillors Cousins, Keel, and I think I heard Councillor Garbett Moore as well giving apologies.
Yes, right. He had, yeah. Okay,
Great.
Thank you. And the first thing on the agenda is the minutes of the meeting held on March the 25th. Bear with me. I suggest that the minutes of the meeting of the overview and scrutiny meeting held on the 11th of February 2021 be approved as a correct record.
Seconded.
Do we need to have a vote on that, or could it just be put forward?
Can be taken by general affirmation if nobody's got any objections.
Is there any objections?
No, Chair, no raised hands.
Okay, thanks. So could you make a note of that, please?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Chair.
I've restarted my iPad and it's still doing exactly the same thing. So we'll have to continue on the phone at present. I shall keep trying. The next on the agenda is any urgent business. I haven't received any urgent business. Are you aware of any, Simon?
No, there's no urgent business I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is declarations of interest. Can members indicate whether they will be declaring any interest under the Code of Conduct for anything on the agenda tonight?
No raised hands, Chair.
Thank you. And we'll come to item number 5, which is the external audit progress report. And could the officer introduce themselves and take that forward for me, please?
Happy to do so. Good evening, Councillor Middleton, and good evening, other colleagues and councillors. My name is Gareth Mills, so I'm the engagement lead from Grant Thornton. We're the appointed auditors to the council, and this is our third year of auditing Ryedale. So I guess this item on the agenda and the subsequent one on the audit plan just sets out, I guess, the background to where we are in relation to our audit planning for the 2021 financial year external audit. In terms of general progress to date, we continue to meet very regularly with senior management. So myself and Talina, we've got regular meetings with Anton and senior members of his team, and we've been holding those throughout the recent months in terms of informing our audit planning and working through with finance colleagues in terms of the pulling together of the 2021 accounts and the audit thereof. And also we do meet on a quarterly basis with the Chief Executive. So myself and Talina will be meeting next Thursday with Stacey and Anton to have that quarterly update in terms of the sort of the strategic issues impacting on the council. I probably won't say too much more in terms of a verbal update, because the bulk of I guess where we're at in terms of the audit will come under the next item on the agenda, which is the audit plan. But
right, okay.
Did you want me to go straight into the audit plan, Councillor Middleton, or shall I just pause it?
No, I'm happy for you to go straight into it, and then I think if anybody's got any questions, they could come back to you afterwards, if that's okay.
That's fine. Thank you, Councillor Middleton. So in terms of the audit plan, if members of the committee could turn to page 7 of 78, and that's headed up Key Matters. So this is the audit plan for 2021. It sets out sort of our key audit understanding of Ryedale based on that informed discussions and meetings that we've had with Anton and his colleagues and with Stacey throughout the year. And it's culminated in this audit plan that's before the committee this evening. The plan was discussed and agreed with Anton a couple of weeks ago. So on that first section, Key Matters, we've highlighted some of the, I guess, key issues impacting on the authority. So clearly one of the big issues at present is around the local government reorganisation in North Yorkshire that's currently subject to consultation and review, and clearly that's a key area of our discussions with the Chief Executive and the Chief Finance Officer, and indeed we'll be looking forward to an update on that next Thursday. And there may well be, obviously, implications arising from that. We've highlighted the financial position at present in the second paragraph on that particular page, in terms of the impact of COVID on the council's position. Obviously, the additional government grants that were received, the contributions that have been made from reserves, and I guess the expected deficit for the councilling year of about 800,000 when it was last reported at the end of Q3, the bulk of which is obviously driven by the impact of the COVID pandemic. Notwithstanding that, obviously the council's reserves position is in a relatively healthy position. It was just under 16 million at the end of last year when we audited last year's accounts. So I guess there's sufficient reserves in place to offset that particular challenge. But obviously this is something that we'll be keeping under review as we look ahead to the 2021 budget and beyond. And that's something we'll be looking at as part of our value for money work. Just turning the pages. So in terms of key audit risks, we've listed them there on the right hand side in section 2 on page 8 of your pack. So the valuation of land and buildings and investment properties, a perennial key risk area for external auditors that members of the committee will have seen in our first 2 years of audit, and in addition the value of the pension fund liability. So those two areas are really the key large figures that sit on the council's balance sheet that are subject to quite a lot of estimate and judgment from the council and from the council's experts that they utilise for that valuation of your land and buildings and to value the pension fund liability. And in addition to those two risks, you've got the standard one of management override of controls. And what that's really around is those areas of the accounts that could be susceptible to management manipulation arising from areas of estimate and judgment, so that it attracts that additional audit scrutiny. Our materiality for the audit is looking around about the 440,000 mark, based on our calculations at present. So that's a figure that we deem to be material in terms of your accounts. But we have a lower reporting trivial threshold for any errors or adjustments that we pick up of just over £20,000, and that will be included in our ISA 260 report later this year. I'll come back to value for money arrangements in a moment, but in terms of audit logistics, our interim visit has been taking place this month, and our audit visit is due to commence in July. I think it's just worth pointing out at this stage to the committee to be absolutely sort of clear and transparent in that the audit deadline, which last year was extended to the end of November as a result of the COVID pandemic, Grant Thornton as a firm and indeed the other firms were pushing for a continued deadline, audited deadline of the end of November for this year. However, MHCLG has proposed an audit deadline of the end of September, which we do not believe is a realistic target date for this year. So I can't give the commitment to us signing off the accounts by 30th of September this year. What that does mean is, in order to comply with the statutory requirements, the council would need to include a brief explanation on the 30th of September that the audit is continuing to progress at that stage. Just to be really clear, there's no naming and shaming of any auditor, any authority that doesn't hit the 30th of September, and there are no financial penalties arising from that either. And I'd also add that this is the same message that I'm giving across my local authority clients for this year, as indeed are my other colleagues within Grant Thornton. So as a firm, we're very supportive of the move to a 30th of September sign-off, and in a normal year, we would be absolutely fine with that. But because of the backlog of work that kicked in from last year, auditors are slightly behind where they would expect to be in terms of this year's audit, and therefore bringing it forward to the end of September this year we don't believe is realistic. And I'll come back to the audit fee in a moment. Section 3 looks at the significant risks. So we've already talked about management overrider controls, the valuation of land and buildings on page 10, the valuation of the pension fund on page 11. Section 4 looks at accounting estimates and judgments and the disclosures that relate to that. There's a new auditing standard for this year's accounts, ISA 540, and that expects management to take a more detailed and informed judgment on those key material areas of estimate and judgment and explain those through to their auditors. It expects us as auditors to audit them in more detail, and it also expects those charged with governance, i.e. You members that sit on this audit committee, that you will have an understanding of those key areas of estimate and judgment and have the opportunity to challenge management on the calculation of those judgments. So I would expect at a later committee, perhaps the July one or perhaps the October meeting, that there will be a paper that you will see on that from both ourselves and Anton's team. Just turning the pages, not wishing to draw out everything, but section 6 on page 16, that starts with the recommendations that we raised in last year's ISA 260 report, so that we reported back in October of last year. And we've got an update there from Anton and colleagues in terms of where things are at in terms of the recommendations. Hopefully they're relatively clear, so they go on to page 17 and page 18. Page 19 is the materiality discussion in a little bit more detail. And then section 8 on page 20, this sets out the new value for money conclusion that auditors are required to give this year as part of the new code of practice that was issued by the National Audit Office. So you may recall in our first year, we had a qualified value for money conclusion on the basis that there was a lack of reporting of financial performance and risk management arrangements. And then last year, we could see that those arrangements that were introduced in 18-19 had been in place for the full year. They were embedded, and we issued a clean value for money conclusion last year. This year, as I say, it's a new format of review. The level of work that auditors perform has increased in terms of a sort of a base threshold, and there's a requirement for us to put together a commentary on 3 particular themes which are set out there around financial sustainability, your governance arrangements, and then effectively areas where you can demonstrate your sort of performance delivery and achievement of VFM. So we'll be working between now and towards the end of the year in increasing our knowledge and engagement with the council across those 3 particular themes. And then on section 9 on page 21, this highlights the sort of type of recommendations and potential significant weaknesses that may arise from that work. So on the left-hand side, based on our initial planning to date, we're not saying there is a particular significant weakness in our view in the council's arrangements at this stage. Despite that lack of significant weakness, as I've put there in that second paragraph, just to be clear, the lack of an additional weakness doesn't mean less work from an audit perspective. As I say, this year there's an increased level of work to be performed across those 3 particular themes, and obviously we'll be continuing to monitor the council's arrangements in place up until we sign off, and if there are any issues that do emerge as the year progresses, then we may decide to highlight a particular significant weakness for further investigation. On the right hand side there, Chair, there's the sort of different hierarchy of recommendations that we can raise as a result of our value for money work. So those raised from at the very sort of significant and serious level of a statutory recommendation, where we're saying there's fundamental pervasive issues at a particular local authority that management and members are not grappling with appropriately. We'd raise what's known as a statutory recommendation, down to more of an improvement recommendation where we'll be highlighting things a bit like we've done for the previous years, areas that we can highlight to enhance, I guess, existing controls or improvements to existing controls in place at the authority. So the logistics are set out on page 22, Chair. And again, just to be really clear, that year-end audit where we're looking to complete our audit work in terms of the detailed testing by the end of October, and then report to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 18th of November. That's the target date that we're working to in terms of signing off the accounts. And then the month previous to that, we're targeting presenting our ISA 260 report. And then the final report, the auditor's annual report, which will pull together and summarise all that work on the value for money arrangements. We're targeting the January meeting of this committee. On the left-hand side on that page, you've got the audit team. So hopefully you'll welcome the fact that that team is consistent with prior years. So it's certainly, most clients will find that helpful in terms of we've got an existing relationship with management, with the audit committee, and an understanding of your issues. The final couple of pages are in respect of audit fees. So again, just worth pausing and just acknowledging the things on page 23 on this one. So you've obviously got a set scale fee as a council set by PSAA of just over £32,000, and I guess that was set back in 2017 when the contracts were awarded. As we've seen over that time, the level of expectations from audit regulators has significantly increased, and Anton and his team will no doubt testify to the level of detailed work that we've been doing over that time, particularly around the valuation of your land and buildings and the valuation of the pension fund deficit. And that's led to, I guess, fee variations being discussed and ultimately agreed by Anton and you as a wider committee in the previous 2 years. So for this year, we're saying that your scale fee of £32,000 does need increasing to reflect all that additional work on the accounts. But in addition to that, the new value for money code, which obviously is new for this year, does represent a significant increase in time, and that's largely going to be led by myself and Talina. So you've got a higher, I guess, a richer skill mix in terms of delivering that work. So ultimately, all that goes through into a proposed fee of £57,000, which is a £25,000 uplift. And whilst I'm under no illusions that that's a significant percentage increase, it is worth mentioning that the Redmond review did recognise that audit fees had dropped significantly over the years and weren't reflective of the work that auditors were doing. And as a result, MHCLG have made £15 million available to local authorities to cover the impact of those fees. And Grant Thornton as a whole have got 40% of the local authority audit market. So when you map out our fee increases across our client base, our fee increases are about 40% of that 15 million. So my understanding is that MHCLG or PSAA will effectively fund that £25,000 uplift, and then we will then obviously bill the council back. So in essence, it's a net nil impact for the local authority. So again, that's just a key point I wanted to draw attention to members. The final page, Chair, page 25, section 12, that just highlights the non-audit work that we do. So again, it's really important that you've got confidence that we are an independent set of external auditors, and therefore any non-audit work we highlight very clearly. Now, there is such thing as an audit-related non-audit work, so that's where we're saying the certification of your housing benefit claim. It's very typical for the external auditor to also perform that work. And then the non-audit work that Grant Thornton does for the council, just less than £4,000 there, which is an analytical subscription that the council subscribes to. But just to be clear, that work is led by people outside of the public sector audit team. So I have no input into that whatsoever, Chair. So I appreciate I've gone through that in quite a bit of detail, but there were particular things around the timetable and the audit fee that I recognise could be slightly sensitive, and I wanted to make that point to members. But obviously happy to take any questions, Councillor Middleton. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Do any councillors have any questions?
There's a hand from Councillor Wass.
Councillor Wass?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for that, Gareth. It was very informative. I always find these things, they look quite daunting on paper, but, Anton does a great job when he's telling us what's going on, and I would like to thank you for what you've done. Just a couple of questions. I hope they don't appear too naive. You mentioned the change in the audit date, and on page 14, you mention under the estimation of uncertainty that obviously there is how do the management address this estimation uncertainty when selecting this point to estimate. And I'm just thinking that if the date is moved back, obviously you're going to have no control over this, but I presume the later the date, then the better quality data you've got to actually base all your findings on, or is that not so much the case?
That's a really good question, Councillor Wass. I mean, you're right in a sense. I mean, obviously the accounts are drawn up as at 31st of March 2021, and Anton and his colleagues have got to pull together the accounts based on their information at that time. That said, Councillor Wass, you're absolutely right that the later the audit sign off, the more up-to-date information is available to me as the external auditor that I can take into account up until the date that I issue my opinion. Now, there are quite clear accounting standards as to whether that updated information would impact on the council's numbers or not. So they're what's known as either adjusting post-balance sheet events or non-adjusting post-balance sheet events. But nevertheless, anything of any significance we'd probably put in our ISA 260 report to this committee in October. I mean, typically, as you say, Anton and his wider team have done a very good job of pulling the accounts together in the 2 years that we've audited. Good level of audit working papers, a really good level of engagement and interaction with the audit process. And I probably should have said in my plan, the decision to not push for the 30th of September sign-off date is in no way a reflection of Anton and his team or this council as a whole. It's entirely my call, and one of the main reasons for doing that is I think it will be unrealistic of me to put that demand on my team to get the audit finished, because when you're trying to work excessive hours to hit a deadline, things can get missed, audit quality becomes at risk, and I'm not prepared to do that. So that's why I've discussed with Anton that we will be looking to sign off on a more realistic timetable. But really good question. It's a good question that about post balance sheet event information.
Could I just ask while I'm on on here, on page 8, you mentioned the management override of controls.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if you could just slightly embellish that, because I'm just wondering what protocols are in place to justify what is being spent, and to obviously for us to scrutinise that it's in accounting terms it's justifiable and it's done accordingly.
Yeah, so I think there's a few things to say on that, Councillor Wass. So one is that the management override of controls is a standard, universal, significant risk across all audits, irrespective of the sector. So if you picked up probably BT PLC's audit plan, it would have that in, for example. And what that risk is really driving at is what are the material areas of these accounts that management could potentially manipulate because it's based on a judgment call or an estimate as opposed to an actual figure. So, if you're owed £100,000 at the year end and there's an invoice for it, it's fairly clear that is the figure. These are areas where, Anton and his colleagues are taking a judgment. So that there is a risk, and I'm not saying this for 1 minute that Anton would be manipulating the accounts, but there is a risk that there's less certainty over certain numbers because people are making either an estimate and or a judgment, and therefore from an audit point of view it becomes a higher risk and driving a greater degree of scrutiny. So things that we typically look at, and we do set this out in a bit more detail on page 9, Councillor Wass, is things like the use of journals. So wherever things are being moved from one place in the accounts to another, or are being put through at certain times of the day or on weekends or things like that, we look at sort of high risk, unusual journals and what is the justification and rationale for someone putting a journal through on a bank holiday or at midnight or something like that. So we've got a really good data interrogation system where we can basically run all your journals through it, and it'll it'll chuck out at the other end those that are deemed unusual or high risk, and then we go back to management and ask them to justify why that was the case. There's also things like, as I say, key areas and big figures like the valuation of your estate, like the valuation of the pension fund, that are little assumptions or fluctuations one way or the other can lead to really material differences in the valuation of your land or your buildings or the pension fund. And obviously your materiality is about 440,000, so little movements in those areas can quite quickly become material. So again, it's a key area that we do look at in detail, but obviously management, the finance team, your valuer, they're aware of that, so they need to provide some pretty comprehensive audit working papers and rationale for supporting what's actually gone into the accounts.
Right.
So I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Yeah, very. Can I just ask then about the risks, because you kind of you're inferring that in terms of anomalies, but under the significant VFM weakness, the statutory recommendations. Now, if it gets to that level, I presume there's significant warnings before that. You're not going to get into one quartile and then suddenly be hit with, oh, we didn't see that coming.
Yeah, so I guess, that's, and again, a good question. So, I guess if you looked across Grant Thornton's engagement with Ryedale since we were appointed back at the beginning of 1819, I guess when in our first year, obviously we highlighted a number of recommendations, a lot around sort of governance, risk management, in-year financial reporting, which we didn't think were appropriately in place at that time. And we ended up, in effect, qualifying the council's VFM conclusion in 1819. So that would be, in sort of the modern VFM terms, we would have gone down the route of, just bear with me, I'm just getting back to the correct page now. That would have been under the key recommendation category, so that second tier, where we were effectively saying that arrangements weren't in place in those particular areas. We didn't believe they were fundamentally pervasive across the entire council, so we didn't raise a statutory recommendation. Then if you look ahead to our second year, i.e. last year's audit, a lot of the processes that Anton and other colleagues introduced in 1819 had been in place for the full year, and therefore they were becoming embedded, and appropriate reporting was being done, and we ultimately issued a clean VFM conclusion last year. So I guess it would be, it'd have to be something really fundamental and significant to immediately jump to a statutory recommendation in terms of our audit work this year. And based on, I guess, what level of engagement and planning work we've done thus far and discussions with Anton and colleagues, we're not aware of anything that would trigger a statutory recommendation. But obviously, there may be something that crops up between now and November when we sign off that could potentially lead to that. And if it did get to that stage, clearly, I'd be discussing that with Anton, with Stacey, with the chair of audit, given its potential significance. And obviously within the firm, when we get to those higher profile recommendations, there's a sort of a consistency panel quality assurance process. So I can't just issue a stat rec on Ryedale without going through proper channels within GT either.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay,
just one final one, and this is just kind of reading hearsay, if you like. I understand because of COVID, there's going to be implications in terms of what we're paying in terms of pension costs for the future. Do you know if there's anything in line that's about to happen with this? Because obviously that could have a big impact for us when we are auditing.
I mean, there probably will be. I mean, as part of pension fund contributions, there's always, I guess, amendments and changes that are processed each financial year off the back of that. And I would imagine there'll be some changes arising in terms of either contributions or whatever in terms of contributions to the pension fund. I can't say in detail from my knowledge what those may be. I mean, Anton or other colleagues may know more about that, but from an audit point of view, we will be looking at the assumptions that the actuary has used on things like COVID, and we have our own auditor expert that is employed not just by GT but across all the audit firms that do local authority audits. It's PwC. So PwC do an assessment of all the actuaries that deal with local authority pension funds, and they actually look at the different ones, Hyman Robertson and all these AON, etc., and they'll look across any assumptions that look like a potential outlier to then sort of challenge why they've come up with a slightly different judgment. So that's the sort of thing we'll be looking at. But in terms of the actual sort of contribution rates and things like that, it's not something I know at this stage.
That's great. Lovely. Thank you very much, Gareth. Cheers. Thanks,
Right,
Chair.
thank you, Councillor Watt.
Thank you, Councillor Watt. Is there any other questions?
Chair, there's a couple of hands. There's Councillor Rain and then Councillor Oxley have got their hand up as well.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rain.
Hello, thank you. It's just on page 17, number 6, it does mention about how many years the code of conduct, policies and things that haven't been updated. And in the management response, it does actually say certain policies that have. But I just worry, is there anything in place that, because surely these policies are so important, is there anything in place for future that these policies will be kept updated? I mean, when you look at the whistleblowing policy last updated 2006, it's rather worrying. And it's just that side of it, that is there anything in place that where these can be updated regularly and doesn't take all these years to do it?
Shall I come in on that one?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that's probably one for you, Anton.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, thanks, Councillor Ian. Yeah, I mean, I suppose this is noting what the position was like, and we do now review regularly the policies, and we actually, by the time this was written, as you see on the right hand side, council had replaced the old whistleblowing policy. So that's one example of where we have changed and updated, and we've been doing that continuously, COVID permitting. We had another go at it just around autumn time, and so we will bring back to you, because this is useful, because what I'll have to show to Gareth and the auditors is our progress on that for the year, and that'll be a good opportunity to show members the full progress that's been made. But I can give you some assurance that we are now on that. As I say, probably not done quite as much as we would have liked to because of COVID, but we are on it.
Oh, thank you.
And just to add from my perspective, Councillor Rain, we will include these again in the ISA 260 in October. So, whatever happens between now and October, as Anton says, we'll be liaising with Anton on that and put the sort of latest position in the report in October.
Thanks for that. Councillor Oxley?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just picking up on that, aren't the ongoing looking at these policies now enshrined in the council plan anyway? I think they are, but not. Yes. I think they are. So I think that again, that is about us, the members, making sure that the council plan is being applied. I think we're part of that process. If I can just pick up on a couple of other issues, Gareth, we've got an estimate of autumn for some resolution, if that's the right word, of local government reorganisation. Does a move in that date, either forward or backwards, have any significant impact on the amount of work that you do, or not, please?
It probably won't have a significant impact in terms of this year's audit. I think, depending on what judgment's reached on that, the the significance of that will probably be felt more next year and potentially the year after, which in theory could be the final year of this council in its present guise if things do go through. So it's something obviously, we became aware of, just through media channels. We've started a discussion with Stacey and Anton on this. I suspect it will be a standing item in any meeting we have with Stacey and Anton from now until such time as these things conclude. And as I say, there will be an element of work that we probably do as part of this year's review, just in terms of the council's engagement with that process. But I think the real sort of impact on our audit work will probably come more into play next year and the year after. And clearly, from our perspective, we're still the auditors to you as an independent statutory body up until such time as you're no longer one. And therefore, all my requirements as external auditor in terms of value for money judgments, financial position, financial sustainability, those will continue to be key things that we'll be wanting to monitor, as indeed I'm sure you are as members, and Anton as Section 151 officer, and Simon as monitoring officer. So all those key governance areas will still continue up until such time that Ryedale and the other districts may no longer exist. But it's a good question. So it's on the radar. There'll be some work performed this year, but I think it'll be increasingly a higher degree of work in the next couple of years, depending on what happens.
Thank you, guys. That's reassuring. Thank you. And just finally, in the new set of key criteria, value for money, economy, efficiency and effectiveness, how broad or scope is that? And is it you being proactive about those issues, or is it our officers being proactive about those issues?
That's a really good question. I mean, it is a fairly broad term. I mean, I've sort of best described that particular strand. Sorry, I don't know what that was. Just bear with me one moment. Are you all right? All right. Either wife or daughter dropped something. Apologies for that, Councillor Oxley. Nearly gave me a heart attack.
It's not the worst thing that's happened on a Zoom call.
Could be worse. Yeah, so it can be quite a broad area, that one. I mean, I've sort of best described it as, what are your sort of key performance indicators as an authority across, varying themes, and how are you performing against each of those? Are you on target? If not, what mitigating actions are taking place? And I would say, from an audit perspective, it's always a more sort of robust and, I guess, reassuring audit when the council themselves engage in that particular review. So if the council's got a very clear steer saying, these are our key performance indicators, these have gone really well because of X, Y, and Z, these are not quite where we'd want them because of these reasons, but these are the actions that we're taking. It's that type of discussion and debate that we're quite looking forward to having with colleagues, and conscious, again, just to be really clear, whereas obviously the accounts are almost entirely sort of Anton's remit, and rightly so, the value for money review is an overarching review of the council as a whole. So it's not, it's not all on Anton to get the council's story correct, I guess, on value for money. It's incumbent on other members of SMT, to engage with us and help tell the council's story. That will help sort of inform our review of that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's good. Again, it just reassures me in terms of the breadth, the scope, and the potential for involvement. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Oxley.
Any more questions? No, I can't see any more hands up. Oh, Will, is your hand back up now?
It's just my hand.
Thanks for that, Gareth. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Middleton. Thank you. Appreciated.
Okay. Obviously, I'm here now, but I don't know how long it's going to last for, so I might have to go back to the phone.
If we move on to item 7, I think the third internal audit and counter fraud progress report, could I hand over to the officer?
You can indeed, Chair. Thank you for that. And just to introduce this item, really, I'll take the first aspect on the internal audit progress report, and then I'll hand over to my colleague Jonathan Dodsworth, who will cover the counter fraud aspect of the progress report. So this report begins on page 35 of your packs and runs through to page 38. It's your routine audit progress report, and it summarises the work that we've done to date in this year in relation to the agreed programme of work for 2020-21. I think you'll see it's plain to see from the report that progress hasn't been to the level that we'd hope and expect by this point in the year. We are, however, encouraged by the fact that all audits that we've got scheduled to deliver as part of the programme for this year are now underway. And I can also now tell you that one of the audits, the Council's audit of main accounting system, has now been completed to draft report stage. Strategic Management Board, and as we've reported many times previously, they've given full support to as far as they've possibly been able to during the audit year, and we've been extremely grateful for the support they have been able to provide. But clearly, times have been tough for the council in terms of response to COVID-19, and that's unfortunately had some impact on officer availability and therefore the ability to progress audit work. Strategic Management Board do recognise that the timelines for completion of work have therefore slipped, and will continue to finalise remaining audit work in the early part of 2021-2022. The reduced coverage in terms of the number and scope of audits, which I'll come to shortly, will also be reflected in our annual opinion. We're still determining the extent of the limitation of scope at this point in time, but it will depend on what we're able to conclude ahead of the next meeting of this committee in July, and then on any other assurances that we're able to use and obtain reasonably for the July meeting. So following on from that, I do also need to draw the committee's attention to some further changes in the 2020-21 plan, which have been agreed with Anton through client liaison arrangements. In our last report to this committee in January, we explained that the ICT and environmental health audits had been deferred to 2021-2022. The report updated the committee on the difficulties that the council has been experiencing and the knock-on impact that had in terms of prioritising audit work and our ability to continue with the plan. The same difficulties which were quite pervasive in 2020 have also continued into 2021, which we might well have expected. And it's meant that a further 3 audits have been deferred into 2021-2022, again subject to risk assessment in pulling together the plan for next year to ensure that they remain a priority area of focus for the council. Those 3 audits are health and safety, information governance, and debtors. The days from these deferred audits have actually been used during 2020-21 to fund extra bits of work that we've undertaken in helping to support delivering business grant scheme post assurance work in conjunction with the counter fraud team, and also some additional work that we've undertaken on what we'd consider to be a couple of key audits in the plan. So the first being waste and street scene, and the second being creditors. We've been providing support and advice to the council's change and advisory board and other stakeholders on changes and redesign of the lettings management system. And during the year, we've also continued to support the governance team with the council's risk management framework, and revised and refreshed risk management guidance is currently with Strategic Management Board for their consideration, and they hope to launch that shortly. We don't have any matters that we'd wish to raise at this point in time with regards to the follow-up of management actions. We feel that we've had good engagement on that front. And I guess just to draw your attention to Appendix A, which does provide an overview of the 2020-21 programme and kind of shows in summary form what I've just described to you there. So happy to take any questions you might have at this stage, and then we'll pass over to to Jonathan for him to be able to reflect on the work of the counter fraud team in the year to date.
Thanks for that. Anton, have you got your hand up? No. Is there any questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair. If I may just take the opportunity just to comment briefly on that. I think there's a theme here for both external and internal audit, and indeed for all of us. I don't know how many times I've said it, but these are not normal times, and it's not been a normal year for all sorts of reasons. So I think the approach that's been taken is very pragmatic. I'm grateful to Connor and to Veritao for the sort of shift in some of the work that they've done. So we've been pragmatic, moved away from what we'd originally planned and into the support they've given us for things like the business grants, which were a really important part of our work over the last year. And again, like the previous report, there is a little bit of extra time that we've got this year where we will try and ensure that we can get that evidence to enable internal audit to give the right opinion. It's just reminding the committee that actually the internal audit plan, we didn't agree it until the end of October last year. So it's not that we've got an extra sort of 3-4 months into the new financial year. It's actually we'll still be doing this probably in a shorter time than normal. But we'll do as well as we can. And so I just want to thank both sets of auditors for their understanding in this.
Thanks, Anton. Is there any questions from the councillors? Councillor Loss?
Yeah, just it's a difficult question to ask and probably even more of a difficult question to answer. But when do you think, I mean, are we going to have to change our benchmark if things don't go back to normal? Because, you know, obviously businesses are trying to get back to a more secure footing and some more outlines and guidelines about what they're going to be doing. But surely we can't keep on saying there's no guideline for the future because of this and this and blame things, because our working practices are going to have to change in the way we look at things. Otherwise, we're skewing the data or we're making it say other things. I don't quite know what I'm saying directly, but I just get that, you know, a lot of reports are because of COVID, and it's almost where do we get to where we can't really say that. I'm not trying to, you know, point a finger or do anything because it is very difficult, but I think we've got to make sure that we've got a benchmark to say, right, this is what we're looking at and focusing from, or we're going to look at data in a different way.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Watts. Yeah, absolutely valid point. What I would say is, irrespective of any kind of carryover in audit work that's delivered in, say, May to June, in respect to the 2020-21 programme, won't affect the 2021-22 programme in terms of the days that we're anticipating to deliver. Yes, it will create a kind of internal resource pressure on ourselves, but something that, being a wider organisation, we can look to absorb and ensure that our resource management and scheduling will allow us to complete a full plan next year, provided we get the level of engagement that we need in order to do so. So, you know, I'd be like to thinking we sit here at this point next year and there's no more commentary on that particular aspect, only looking backwards to say how it's informed the work that we've done.
Yeah, and I know it's been a nightmare. I you know, can only begin to imagine what you guys have got to go through to get things together. But I just think in terms of, you know, the electorate that ask us to ask questions, you know, we've got to ask those. So thank you for that.
Thank you. If there's no other questions, I think we can move on to Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to update the committee about counter fraud progress, and that's in Annex 2 of our report, which starts on page 39. of your packs. And this updates to the point of the 28th of February, which was the latest I could get in terms of producing the reports. COVID-19 grant-related fraud has been a large area of work across all of our clients this year. We're currently supporting the council with the restart grants that are currently being issued to businesses. At the same time, we're doing a post-assurance exercise looking at grant payments that were made during the first lockdown, so the April to September grants. We've uncovered fraud, we've stopped fraud, and we have 5 ongoing investigations, which is a really small number compared to the large number of businesses that received grants from Ryedale District. On page 41, we look at our targets. So we've achieved £19,000 of savings up to the 28th of February. We've blocked £30,000 in COVID-19 grants, and we've achieved a reasonably high success rate in our investigations. So we're on track to meet our targets, and in fact, the early figures that I've seen show that we're going to surpass our performance from last year. So that's really pleasing. The report continues to document our work on the National Fraud Initiative, fraud in specific areas against the council, and also the non-investigative side of our work. So that would include, for example, an anti-fraud leaflet was included in council tax billing in March. And that's a good message to give to the public to say that Ryedale District wants to stop fraud, and also it gives an outlet to say, if you're aware of fraud against the authority, this is how you report it, and we will do our best to do something about it. So those are the points that I'd like to raise from the report, but I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Jonathan. Is there any questions? Councillor Oxley.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Jonathan. The grants, the business grants. I think obviously amazing job's been done, and it doesn't look as though we've had much attempted fraud, or if we have, we've found some of it. If this is not the right forum, just tell me, please. I'm aware of small business people concerned now about the ongoing nature of, if you like, stopping grants. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That they are where some people, they're not clear on whose responsibility it is to say, I don't think I should get this, or I think I'm back in business, or whatever it might be. If it's a question I should be talking to somebody else tomorrow, just tell me.
I think I can help answer that. The criteria for receiving the receipt of grants is determined by central government. They release guidelines to all councils, and councils release funds where they believe people are entitled. If a business has made a mistake and a grant should stop, then they should report that to the council, and I'm sure that will happen. I would say, from the counter fraud perspective, we're not here to penalize businesses. We're not here to be unfair. We're literally here to try and stop people who are committing fraud and criminal acts. And a large number of these people are actually operating from outside of the county, and in fact outside of this country. So there's been small numbers of businesses that have been caught up locally, but for the most part, they're really tiny minority.
Great.
Does that help?
Yeah, that helps me in terms of people have asked me questions. Yeah, thank you. Sorry if it was a bit opportunistic.
Thank you, Councillor Oxley. Thank you, Jonathan. Is there any more questions?
There's no further raised hands, Chair.
Okay. Can I just go back, because I should have had recommended that the reports were noted. Did we need to vote on that, or?
Chair, I think if we note that the recommendation on the internal audit and counter fraud progress report for 2020-21 is that the committee note the work undertaken by internal audit and the counter fraud team in the year to date for that one.
Thank you. Sorry, bear with me, my internet is appalling. Moving on to the update on risk management, and I believe Anton is this one for you.
Sorry, Chair, can I just interrupt? We do have the counter fraud governance plan from Jonathan from agenda item pages 45 to 50.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry about that. Jonathan, if you want to go ahead with yours.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and be as quick as possible. The annual counter fraud plan calls for 105 days of counter fraud work in 21-22. That's the same as last year, and will continue to do that. The plan is in Annex A of the report, and it estimates how this time will be spent. So there's a variety of areas such as investigative work, COVID-19 liaison with outside partners, data matching, activities like that. But I would like to draw your attention to one aspect of this, which is the targets that my team worked to. We've worked for many years towards a savings achieved target and a percentage success rate. This year, we're proposing to remove those targets from the team. We invariably meet those targets, and as with last year and this year, we have far exceeded those targets. However, they can skew the work of our team away from proactive work and focusing really on uncovering fraud and recovering it, and less on more holistic things such as providing awareness to staff, doing more work with the public, things that are less easily quantifiable but are equally important. So our proposal is to continue to report those figures to the committee, but not treat them as a formal target. I hope that's acceptable to the committee. But I'm happy to take any questions on this.
Thank you, Jonathan. Is there any questions, councillors?
No hands, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So no. Can we have the report noted? Recommend that the report is noted. Do we need to vote on that?
Chair, I think if everybody's in agreement with that, we can do that. I can't see anybody advising that they're not.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Moving on now. Thanks. Moving on now to number 9 on the agenda is the update on risk management. Anton, I think we're over to you now.
I think actually this is Simon's report. This is one he's written this time, so I'll hand over to him if that's okay, Simon.
Yes, it's my report. Thank you, Chair. And put together with the assistance of two of my colleagues who work on risk management, so I should give them credit for the work involved. The Corporate Risk Register is the key strategic document which sets out the medium to long-term goals and objectives of the council and the risks associated with them. And we bring the register to committee twice a year for you to consider. It last came in October, but the register is a live document and we review and update it on a regular basis to set out controls and mitigations which are in place for the risks it identifies. Each risk in the corporate risk register, which is Appendix 1, is rated firstly for an original risk view, so that's before there are any controls in place. Then for a current perspective, where all the controls and mitigating actions are in place at the current time. And then for a target with controls that are forthcoming and planned to be introduced. So the risk scores given down the right-hand side of the risk register are based on two elements. So the first one is the probability of an event occurring. So that's the likelihood. And the second one is the consequence if an event does occur. So that's the impact. And the score is calculated using a matrix, which is on page 52 of the agenda packs. Alongside the ongoing work we've been undertaking on the corporate risk register, we've also produced a refreshed risk management guidance document, which we've been working on in conjunction with Connor's team at Ryedale. The recommendation is to note the risk register and feedback any comments to officers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. Is there any questions?
Councillor Brackstone has a hand up.
Okay, Councillor Brackstone.
I don't know if this is a bit of a daft question, but something that's appeared on this risk register previously was Brexit, and I just wondered if Brexit is no longer considered a corporate risk, or just has it been superseded by COVID?
I'll just looking through the risk register because it is referenced in there somewhere. If you can just bear with me, I'll try and find where it's covered off.
I mean, I may not have seen it because my paper copy here, some of it is actually missing the photocopy that I have, but I couldn't see anything about it. So,
what I think I'll do is just sort of
Simon, is it page? Is it on page 69 of the agenda?
Yeah, it's definitely referenced there.
Yes,
right, okay,
it is referenced in there. I just couldn't find the reference, but I know it's been picked up as part of
procurement
during the EU transition work we're involved in, linking into a number of service areas. Partly it's linked under contracts and procurement.
Okay.
I think it's also linked around some of the economic development work that we do.
Right.
So it's referenced in a number of places.
Sorry, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. I think the issue was there that on the paper copy, all of it printed off. I wasn't going to use the printed copy because for that reason, but I've had to, but it's next on this copy.
I think Gareth has a hand up.
Yeah, just a comment, if I may. Oh, thanks, Chair. Just a comment, if I may. Just going back to the discussions on our paper, and Councillor Wass was raising, points around, how we go about the value for money work, and this I guess this item here is a really good example of what we didn't see when we were appointed. So this discussion around the key risks facing the authority that management have produced and they're now subject to discussion by elected members, that wasn't in place. So this is a good example where those arrangements did go into place and were in place last year and indeed have carried on this year. And I think from our perspective, that's a good thing. And the fact that things are moving on this and off this, or risks are going up and down, it shows that it's a living, breathing document of key risks facing this council. And I think my challenge to the elected members would be, are these the things that keep you awake at night as an elected councillor at Ryedale? Are these the appropriate risks as you see them for this council? And if they are, great. If not, then obviously it's within your rights to raise queries with Simon and Anton and other officers. And again, just make sure that that sort of governance is in place around risk management. But this is a good example where we've seen a real sort of improvement over the sort of 2 to 3 years that we've been auditors of the council. So it's just more of a comment, Chair, if I may. Thank you.
For that, Gareth. Councillor Oxley.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Gareth for stealing my thunder. It's great to see the way that this references back into the value for money, back to the audit. I think this is probably one of the most important documents that we look at. I think this and the council plan, because it really does give us things that we can input on, and the very fact that the auditors are aware of its importance fills me with great confidence. To me, this is all important, but given what we've been through in the last 12 months, there are huge issues there about making sure that our staff are being looked after properly, and it's good to see that being reported. And I just want to make that point. Amongst all the other risks, one of the biggest risks possible to us is that we reach a stage where our staff are just overwhelmed by it all, and we have to be very careful to make sure that doesn't happen. And monitoring it like this will help to make sure that doesn't happen.
Thank you, Councillor Oxley. Is there any further questions? I can't see any hands up, so I recommend that the committee notes the contents of the report, and if there's no objections, we could go to general affirmation.
Yes, Chair.
I can't see hands up, so if that's noted, please, Christy.
Yes, Chair.
Thanks. We move on to agenda item number 10, which is the ONS.
I don't know if Councillor Middleton's connection has failed. It seems we've certainly lost the sound from her. This is the final item of business. I don't know if another member would like to take the chair, or it looks like we might have Councillor Middleton reconnecting.
Simon, can you hear me?
No, we lost connection.
We can hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Right, okay. I never stopped being able to hear you, so that was a bit strange. Yeah, you are all breaking up a little bit. So who's going through this? Sorry, Simon, I missed a little bit of it.
I'm happy to take this item. Thank you, Chair. This just sets out the forthcoming business for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee for the next few meetings. The committee has various remits at Ryedale. It has the scrutiny remit and the audit remit and also the standards remit. So these are the items of business pending on the forward plan at the moment. I also wanted to draw members' attention, with this being the Council Standards Committee, to the fact there is a member development session next Wednesday evening to provide an update on the government's new National Model Code of Conduct, and to encourage everybody to attend that session. It'll be worthwhile to keep you up to date as what's coming from the government around member conduct. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Councillor Ray?
Thank you, Chair. Simon, it's mainly that I have sent my apologies for that meeting, because I will be here where I am at the moment, working. Is there any way that I could be forwarded the information, or will there be something that we will be able to follow up from that? Is it recording, or just because obviously I would have attended, but I just can't because I'll be work.
Yes, I'm happy for any information to be circulated to members who can't attend, and I'll also see if there's a possibility of a recording being made.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. I think that would be helpful, just for, obviously we're all aware of how important it is, and if people can't attend, it would be helpful if it could be seen at a later date or at a time that suits them. Right. Is there any more questions? No, thank you, Simon. Agenda number 11 is any of the business that's urgent. I haven't been informed of anything, and I don't have anything myself. So I think we can bring the meeting to a close. Thank you to the officers. Thank you to Gareth and Jonathan. And thanks to the councillors for attending and bearing with me with my poor internet and telephone connection.
And thank you, everybody. It's very difficult time.
Thanks, Tracy.
Yeah. Thank you, officers. Thank you,
Chair. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks.
Thank you. Could IT confirm when the stream has stopped, please?